Alright, today we are going to learn about rounding square roots. And if you notice, the picture for today is roots of a tree that form a square. Ha ha! I'm full of these ones. I'm going to keep posting them. Okay, so what does rounding square roots look like? Here we have round square root of 20 to the nearest integer. Square root of 20, is that a rational or an irrational number? In order to figure that out, we need to figure out whether 20 is a perfect square or not. Is there any number times itself that's a nice number that will get me 20? Unfortunately, 20 is not a perfect square, so this is going to be one of those crazy irrational decimals that doesn't terminate and doesn't repeat. So what we need to do is figure out, okay, well, what is it close to? Because if we can say that it's about this, then we can, use a number like this to our benefit. So we're going to try rounding it. Now you could type it into your calculator, and your calculator already rounds it for you to the nearest, I think in this case it would be 7 decimal places. But we can actually calculate this without even using a calculator. And here's what we do. We take the square root of 20, which is what we're trying to find out. And we have to think to ourselves, what perfect squares is 20 between? So let's think about it. What's the next perfect square lower than 20? What would be on this side of 20? The lowest perfect, the perfect square that's next in line with 20. And I think the closest one that you can get to would be 16. Okay? And then you do the same thing for this side. What's the closest perfect square to 20 that's bigger than 20? And this one would be 25. Okay, so we know that the square root of 20 falls in between the square root of 16 and the square root of 25. Again, those are the closest perfect squares we can get to 20. One is lower than it, one is greater than that. The square root of 16 is 4. The square root of 25 is 5. So we know that the square root of 20 is going to be 4 point something. Now the question is it closer to 4 or is it closer to 5? And the way you do that is just simply this. What's the distance between here to here? If you notice that 20 is 4 away from 16, what's the difference between 20 and 25? You notice the distance is 20 is 5 away from 25. So this number, is 20 closer to 16 or is it closer to 25? And you can even just ignore the fact that you have square root symbols. 20 itself, just the number 20, is it closer to 16 or 25? You'll find that it's actually closer to 16. Therefore, if you had to round this to a nearest integer, remember what integer means. Integer means that it is a number that is either a whole number or it's the opposite of a whole number, meaning there's no decimals, there's no fractions. So if you had to round this to the nearest integer, it would be 4 because square root of 20 is closer to the square root of 16 than it is to the square root of 5. So once again, the method is write your your irrational number, your square root of 20. Pick the next closest one that's smaller than it. Pick the closest one that's bigger than it, and then figure out which number it's close to. So in this case, it would be 4. Let's do another example just to solidify it. So in this particular example, they want to know what they want us to round the square root of 90 to the nearest integer. Okay, different colored pen just to lighten up the mood. Okay, so we have the square root of 90. What are the closest perfect squares to 90? The one that's lower than that would be 81. That's a perfect square, and there's no perfect square bigger than 81 that's less than 90. And then the one on this side would be 100. So 90 falls between 100 and 81. Those are the closest perfect squares to them. Square root of 81 is 9. Square root of 100 is 10. And if you notice, like last time, if you don't come out, if when you do this, when you go from here to here, if these numbers right here are not consecutive, you missed one. They should be consecutive in terms of integers. So you should end up with two numbers that are consecutive integers, meaning the only numbers in between them are decimals and fractions. If you come out with a 9 here and an 11 here, there's another perfect square that you're missing. Okay, so you should end up with two numbers that are consecutive. And then you have to figure out, well, this square root of 90, is it going to be closer to 9 or is it going to be closer to 10? And again, the way you do that is you check. 90 is how many away from 81? 9. And 90 is how many away from 100? That'd be 10. So in this case, again, it's closer to the one to the left of it. So if you had to round the square root of 90 to the nearest integer, it would be 9. This would be the closest integer to the square root of 90. Okay? That's about it for rounding square roots of numbers that are not perfect squares. We'll do some examples in class.